let's have a little fireside chat about removing and installing BimmerWorld wheel studs.
What's he doing?
Step one, have your wheel install nuts. Go ahead and get these on a stud you want to remove. Take your wrenches, tighten these things down together to jam them up. I didn't put an insane amount of torque on there, but put a decent bit. I've got a screwdriver back here in the vane of the rotor to keep the rotor from spinning. Not a requirement, but it does make life a lot easier. And then I'm gonna take the back nut and act like I'm loosening it, go counterclockwise, so that this stud will break free. So that's broken free. Wrong way. Now, we can take this stud out. So we need these install nuts again, so I'm going to take the wrenches and break free the nuts. Real simple. Now those are free. And time to install a new nut, almost. We need to clean the threads in this, as these studs do have a dry lock Loctite pre-applied to them, which means that some remnants of that Loctite are in here. So use a thread chaser or a tap, and just, if you use a tap, be careful to not cut new threads. You just want to clean up the old threads a little bit and get rid of any old grossness that may be in there, so that the new Loctite has a good surface to bond to. Now, prep your new stud by getting your install nuts on there. Same deal, tighten these things down a little bit. Blow out any remaining dust grossness that's in there. And thread the new stud in. It's now time to torque the stud in place. I'm gonna torque it to 55 foot-pounds, got my torque wrench, and our instructions say between 50 and 60 foot-pounds, and note that that is a higher torque spec than some other manufacturers of wheel studs. We spec that higher torque spec for two main reasons. One being, you wanna make sure that this stud does not come out when you're changing wheels and tires on track. You have a low torque spec in there, it just opens you up to more possibilities of hitting this with an impact when you're undoing the nut, and the stud coming with it. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to deal with that. The other big reason, really the bigger reason, is that most stud manufacturers don't have this shoulder that is built into the stud. This is a key piece of our premium wheel studs, which means that when we tighten this down, this shoulder is mating against the hub surface. Now, what happens when you don't have this shoulder? That means that the threads bottom out, the threads of the hub bottom out into the stud somewhere, because that shoulder is not mated against the hub. So the threads of the hub cut into the stud itself, basically pre-failing the stud, inducing a stress riser into the stud. That is really what makes these premium race studs a premium, is the extra machining step to put the undercut in here and this shoulder, so that these do not get a stress riser induced into them when torquing them down, and also allows us to put a higher torque spec onto them for the installation process. So let's torque this baby down. Torqued. Now, when you are going to remove the wheel install nuts, you don't want to grab this nut on the outside and try to loosen it, because what that means is then you may take some of that torque away from the stud that you just put into it to the hub. So I grab onto the back nut and continue to tighten it down so that it threads the back nut further in and does not put any release torque onto the nuts to put any release torque onto the stud. So tighten that. And now the wheel install nuts come right off. So that's a quick and dirty how to remove and install our BimmerWorld Premium Race wheel studs. Some other notes that I was thinking about while putting these wheel studs on are some care and feeding maintenance things. You know, these wheel studs are not, you put them on, you don't think about it ever again. You should be replacing wheel studs every season or two, depending on how much you use it. With my use on this car, I'm about a season and a half, and that's, I don't know, 6 weekends a year or so. They are not a lifetime part, so do be cautious and replace your wheel studs on a maintenance interval so that you don't end up with a stud failure that can be costly. Another thing, don't over torque them. We spec 75 foot-pounds on these studs, and definitely don't torque them while hot. Depending on how close together my sessions are in a day, I may be torquing them in the morning and then not checking them again for the rest of the day. If you torque them while hot, yeah, they're gonna snug up a little bit more and you'll be like, oh, my nuts were loosening. No, they weren't. That's just putting fatigue into the fastener that it doesn't need, and you're gonna take life out of it. Another thing that is common for stud issues, we see stud breakage occur when there's an improper relationship between the wheel spacer and the wheel. Check out the link in the description for more information on performing what we call the paper test to make sure that you have the proper wheel to wheel spacer relationship so that you can rest easy. Spacers, not a problem. The BMW GT4s use a 32 mil spacer. The M2 CS Racing uses a 41 mil spacer. We used a 41 mil spacer on the GT More with big, grippy, heavy car. So spacers, not a concern, but you just want to make sure that you are using them correctly in the right relationship with your wheel. So just wanted to make note of a couple of those wheel fastener, wheel stud things. They do require a little bit of maintenance and love. You take care of them, they're gonna take care of you.
You ready to go?
Should be an awesome race weekend.
We are ready to kill it this year.
It's good. It's good.
It's going to be a wild ride.